All right, Fitz, we have some good news that happened last night. We have some bad news that happened last night while we were waiting for the good news. And of course, we have reaction to official visitors that came to Penn State this past weekend. So, as always, this is your segment. Where would you like to start in our conversation about Penn State recruiting from the previous 4 or 5 days?
First comment on the music reminds me of a late 90s tag team intro music. Not like top of the card, but I just love it. Love it. Thank you for that. Number one, Jahmir Joseph last night. James Franklin dropped that tweet at 5:55. We had to wait until about 8:30 for Joseph to admit or to commit publicly. It was not a back and forth situation. It was a wires crossed situation. Hayes Fawcett from On3 was the one that broke the news on social media. That was kind of he was setting it up to go at 6. Jahmir was at practice. There was this whole thing that it was not a big deal at all. Just, T. Frank and I had to have a 2-hour conversation as we waited to go live. But other than that, it was great. But big pickup for Penn State, number 182 in the industry rankings, number 22 cornerback nationally, number 1, 1A, 1B, whatever you want to call it, on Terry Smith's board for a long, long time. I think it's a really good pickup. I encourage you to watch that video from last night. And Joseph's been one of my favorites for the duration of the cycle. If you followed along, you probably know that. And really setting up for another good cornerback class under Terry Smith. Shocker there. Brandon Finney's still out there, but Darius Dixon's on board. Xavier Thomas from Pittsburgh Central Catholic's on board as kind of a slot corner, kind of the Kenny Woosley effect. And this is we're finding ourselves in another situation where this position that they were recruited well, developed well, turned into pros very well. Hey, it's not running itself, but it's doing a heck of a job. And Terry Smith is the main cog in that. So Jahmir Joseph, I think a big pickup for Penn State. Also, T. Frank, I don't know if you have him queued up or not, but he's got kicking highlights in his highlight film. So
I cut it off there. I almost brought it up last night, but it went out of my mind after everything we're talking about. I knew you would love that. Is he the team's kicker, or was that an emergency situation?
He only had a couple in there, so he wasn't Kenny. Kenny Wosley did it last year for Imatep. Moore is a full-time kicker. But yeah, Jahmir was in there kicking off and covering kicks and kicking extra points. And hey, and here's the thing. I joke about it because I'm a special teams guy, whatever. And that's the shtick. But when you can diversify yourself to be more than just as a corner, more than just a wide receiver on the other side, more than just a cornerback, when you show that you have an understanding of how things work in the phases in all phases of the game, that says something. And we talk about, actually there's a mailbag question we're going to get to a little bit later. We're going to talk something kind of similar to that. So looking forward to that. But yeah, Jahmir Joseph, smart player. Want to see him camp. Want to see everybody camp. Want to see how well he runs. But in terms of the film, in terms of a guy that can just flat out play football, play corner, Penn State got another one. Kind of reminds me of Johnny Dixon. Kind of reminds me of John Mitchell from last year. Just another good one in the pipeline.
It also, I think, talks about on his highlight film, he showed multiple examples of effort, chasing down plays from the wrong side of the field, being a team player, and doing something like covering kicks, playing on special teams in general. When you're a Division I prospect, you can go, "Hey, coach, I don't want to risk special teams," because special teams, they're opportunity
they
for
come
injury.
to you and they say, "Hey, we need you for every snap on offense and defense. This is where you get your break." And some guys it works, some guys it doesn't. But if you understand that aspect of the game, because I remember talking to Tony Rojas, talking to KJ Winston and Cam Miller last year, like the importance of special teams and running down on kicks, covering punts, covering kicks, and things like that. It can't be overstated, and it's nothing. It's something we don't talk about. So I guess we kind of understate that, and we lead to that.
Also, coming up from this past week, a reaction from official visits and the class of 2025. One of my favorite players. We just went from one of your favorite players to one of my favorite players, Taz Williams. Is there an update you want to share about that?
Yeah, he was in this weekend for an official visit. I think Penn State's in it. I don't necessarily know that they're the number one coming out of that trip. Texas A&M still in there. Michigan, he's got an official visit to Michigan this weekend. So he's got a lot to weigh. And I think Penn State, and he told me flat out, surprised him, exceeded his expectations. You hear that a lot with guys. Will that lead to the ultimate result? I don't know. But I think Penn State put themselves solidly in that top 3 for Taz Williams. So it'll be interesting to see when that comes out. He's got a decision July 13th. So he's going to go visit Michigan, sort of take back and take in all the information and then make a decision in mid-July. Again, those wide receiver dominoes, they still feel like they're on the cusp of falling at some point. You're talking Jeff Exon, or you're talking Lex Cyrus, throw Taz Williams in the bubble now as well. Hey, it's not going to be a disaster class, and I think that you feel pretty solid about which direction it's going, even though you can't pinpoint which guys are going to end up signing in December.
I want to throw this here in the chat before we get to the last part of Fitz's recruiting update. Corey says, subscribed after last week's T. Frank's wig haunted my dreams. So, guys, it worked. If there's anything else you want to dare me to do here on the BWI Live Show, please go for it. I dare you to dare me. But anyway, let's talk about the last thing, which probably is not news right now, because there's plenty of time to recover from this, but it does go into this conversation of national prospects that Penn State has a great relationship with, and they are in it until they are not. Dia Bell came to Penn State campus multiple times, goes to Texas, I think once, and then commits to Texas in the class of 2026. So Fitz, how do you weigh this conversation of Dia Bell, the work they had done, and then the way that this resolves itself for 26 quarterbacks, and really the conversation does include 2025, where they have some really high-level quarterback prospects that they have targeted, they've been building relationship with, and then they go elsewhere. So I guess how do you view this situation currently with Penn State's quarterbacks?
As we so often do, let's view it in bullet points. Dia Bell goes to Texas. Texas is a top 5 program right now when you're talking about offensive recruiting. They're going to sign a ridiculous, like, Ohio State plus level receiver class. DeCarry Moore is in the mix. I mean, you've got multiple 5-stars. Jamie French, who is a teammate of John Mitchell, now Antoine Belgrave Shorter in Florida. I mean, you've got multiple 5-stars, not pounding down the door, but like getting in line to play for Steve Sarkisian. They've done a heck of a job in terms of developing that into an offense that people want to play in, and better yet, telling you that you want to play in that offense. Like, that, I mean, it's interesting because it's not like the most firepower or anything like that, but they're telling them all the right things to go play in that offense. Dia Bell going to Texas is not a surprise. We wrote about last week in terms of the quarterback dominoes that could happen on the site. And I was told that Texas prioritized Dia Bell coming out of that camp. Troy Hune was the other guy that was batted around in there. Texas moved, and that's what we expected to do. We expected Texas to pick up a top 5 quarterback. They did that. That happens. Yeah. Number 2 on the bullet point, yes, the relationship was great. Penn State has very good relationships with some top quarterbacks in the 2026 class. Brady Hart is one of those. He's probably going to go to Michigan. A lot of picks, including mine, went into Michigan over the last day. Troy Hune, the guy that I just talked about from California. Well, he's at Michigan right now, or he's supposed to be at Michigan right now. You're looking at he was looking at Texas. He was the other guy in that Texas sort of domino effect type thing that we saw. He's probably not going to go to Texas now. So Penn State, all of a sudden, looking like one of the main players for Troy Hune. Does that mean they'll land him? Of course not. That means that he will be in it till the end. Danny O'Brien has them in for some top quarterbacks. Does that mean that they will be the top quarterbacks at the end of the cycle? Another bullet point. Not necessarily. This is an ongoing evaluation. They're doing such. Shooting high right now, but Penn State, especially for a kid from California, a kid from Florida, a kid from North Carolina in Faison Brandon, who's recently picked to land with Tennessee. I mean, you're going to miss. You're going to miss on these guys. So be interesting to see how this whole thing goes with Troy Hune. Troy Hune is visiting this week. I wrote it last week on Blue White Illustrated. I'll let that one out there. He is visiting Penn State this week. So that's a massive, massive visit. We're going to see what happens after that. So there's your bullet points on quarterback recruiting. It's always interesting. Penn State grabbed Drew Aller in the new year. They grabbed Ethan Grunkmeyer in the new year. This is always an evaluation position. They're going to continue to do that just because they miss on these guys in the front end. Doesn't mean that they won't end up with a good quarterback. I think they will in 2026. I don't think that Beckham Kritza is scaring away any 2026 guys, the 2025 commit. He's been a centerpiece of the 2025 class in terms of recruiting, in terms of a lot of things, but in terms of like that ranking and everything that goes with it, like the clout that goes with being a top quarterback. I'm not sure that LSU is going to sign a top one in 2026 because they got Bryce Underwood in 2025. So all these things mesh together. I think Penn State's going to be fine at quarterback in 2026. It's not going to be Dia Bell.
It's an interesting situation where consistency, you mentioned Ethan Grunkmeyer, Drew Aller, I'd even throw Jackson Smolik in there, maybe not from the recruiting perspective, but a guy that made the Elite 11. And was a late riser that a lot of teams were interested in that didn't have a quarterback at that point. So what felt like a trend feels like it's tailing off a little bit, given that, you know, the Matt Zoller is part of the conversation, this Dia Bell part of the conversation hasn't gone their way recently. But I want to circle back just to one thing you said at the beginning about Texas and Diabell. I just think it's so interesting that Steve Sarkisian's offense, and I'm not necessarily an expert on it, but I know a little bit about it. This offense is built off the RPO, and it's built off of creating explosive plays for those receivers and for those quarterbacks. It doesn't necessarily translate to the NFL.
Correct.
But I just find it interesting when you're saying, like, you could go from an offense that has NFL verbiage and can really prepare you for the next level. And yet, if you don't throw for a lot of yards and you don't throw for a lot of touchdowns, the NFL's not interested. So it is this catch-22 of you got to score points. You got to make the receivers want to be in your offense. And you've got to make it fun for those players, but it doesn't necessarily mean like it's setting them up for success later. I would say the same thing at times about Lincoln Riley's offense and some of the things that happen there that don't always translate to the next level. Now, there's nuances in this. Of course, you have Caleb Williams. You can do more in the pro passing game or some of those progression-based or concept-based passing attacks when you have a guy that can do those things. But Arch Manning, Diabell, Quinn Ewers, like, I don't know that these guys are, I don't think this offense is setting them up for being the next Peyton Manning of being able to read any defense, throw the ball to any part of the field, but you get eyeballs and interest because the offense scores points. And I think until Andy Kotelnicki can do that for Penn State or the next offensive coordinator, there is going to be this starts and stops Fitz of recruiting. Hey, it's T. Frank. Did you enjoy that video? Hope you did. I can't get you another one. Actually, yes, I can. You can click on the link here in this part of the video to go to another Blue White Illustrated video. So if you liked it, subscribe here to the Blue White Illustrated YouTube channel. You can also do that by clicking on this interactive link that I'm pointing vaguely to. Super helpful. Also, if you want more from Blue White Illustrated, go to bluewhiteillustrated.com and use our special promo code that you're getting right here. Subscribe for 2 months. You get it for just $1 using promo code PSU1. That's promo code PSU1 over at bluewhiteillustrated.com. You can check out the link in the description of this video to go right there. I try to make it as easy as I can. I just can't click it for you. That's the only, I can't reach over and click the buttons for you. You got to do that part.